Can we get started, Doc, Ravi?
We can question.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vaishnavi, and I'm a program manager for the Bhumi Fellowship. Thank you for joining us this evening. For those who are very new to our work, Bhumi is a non-profit organization that has been working with underprivileged children across the country and in education for over 13 years now. We cater to the needs of children at orphanages, urban slum communities, and low-income schools. So as an organization that is built on the principles of youngsters doing their bit to improve the socio-economic conditions of the country, we launched the Bhumi Fellowship in 2020 to create a deeper impact. This 2-year paid fellowship will offer people like you an opportunity to understand the system, immerse in the classroom as a teacher, design and implement strategies to challenges that low-income schools often face. The experience is tailored around building the potential change agents, and at the end of 2 years, we are hopeful that you will be ready to join the sector as social entrepreneurs. In today's session, we are going to hear from two experienced speakers who are going to help us understand the social sector better and discuss about how one can pursue a career in the social sector. We're joined by Ravi Sreedharan, who is the founder director of ISDM, and Dr. Prahalathan, who's a co-founder of Bhumi. Ravi is a visionary with endless energy, a thought leader, and the key driving force behind ISDM, which is an institution founded to create, strengthen, and establish development management. Through the organization, they've been building leaders for the social sector. As an IIM Ahmedabad alumnus, Ravi switched to the social sector in 2011, joining Azim Premji Foundation, where he was the head of education, leadership, and management. Prior to that, he was a career banker for 24 years with several global stints in multinational banks. Dr. Prahalathan is one of the co-founders of Bhumi, one of India's largest volunteer organizations. He strongly believes every child deserves a quality education and is passionate about making volunteering a habit among young people. By education, he is a doctor specialized in ophthalmology, and at Bhumi, he handles various roles such as strategy and planning, monitoring and evaluation, fundraising, and public relations. Ravi and Doc, thank you for joining us today. We'd like to begin by understanding a little bit about your journey. So, like I mentioned, Ravi, you were an engineering graduate who did an MBA and worked in the corporate sector for many years. Doc, you on the other hand were a practicing ophthalmologist for 7+ years before you made the shift to work full-time in the social sector. So can you walk us through your experience that led you to switch to a full-time career in the social sector? And how has this experience, working in the social sector different compared to your previous roles in the corporate sector? I invite anybody to start.
Ravi, why don't you start?
Oh, you go to start. Okay, I'm all right. All right, this is our mutual respect and admiration. Really, thank you, Vaishnavi, and such a privilege amidst.
Ravi, sorry, you're on
You're on mute. Suddenly you got on mute.
Is that okay? I don't know how I went on mute, but yeah. So I was just saying it's such a privilege to be among so many, sort of passionate youngsters. And you were just asking me about my journey. So, when I started my career in the late 80s, India was still a relatively poor country, and we all lived from one generation to the other, and sort of by the time your father was retiring, you needed to start working and sort of taking care and all that. And pretty much all of us came from lower middle class families, and so did I. And I had to sort of pursue a life of earning some income and being able to contribute to the family and so on and so forth. I was extremely privileged, and I've always called it an ovarian lottery, where I ended up going into an IIT and an IIM and all that. So extremely privileged. But yeah, thanks to that, I was able to ride a wave of post-liberalization and a global economy and all that. I must be honest, in the initial period, I used to think that I'm this very meritorious and very, very capable person. And only much later I realized that there was a lot of privilege sort of really in there, and I got the benefit of that. I think in about 10, 12 years into that career, and I must say, at the risk of sounding very boastful, that I was having an extremely successful career. I was the CEO of the bank within 15, 18 years of working. But I realized that there was a larger thing for me in life. I mean, what is the life that I wanted to live? And I used to always feel I was on stage. While I was doing very well, it didn't feel like that was me. That was the CEO, or that was the marketing director, or whatever it was. And it was really about that, going back to being what I am. That was my calling, really, to come back, and work. And I was always passionate about school education and education in general, largely because I benefited immensely from the privilege of great education that I was able to get. And really, the transition was always going to be into how do we develop the capacity of people to be able to go on to do whatever they want to do for themselves and their communities and their families, and so on and so forth. So that really was my sort of reason to switch. And like you mentioned, I switched 10 years ago, and I was part of Azim Premji Foundation, where I was very fortunate to see the work across the country and all that. And I'll talk a little bit about the specific switch to ISDM. But just in terms of my experience of having worked in the sector, I must say that it's been immensely satisfying. I mean, I couldn't think of the levels of satisfaction that I get out of being in the social workspace that I could have ever imagined in the corporate world. And the second thing is that I find that the work that we do in the social sector is 10x, if not 100x more complex than anything you can imagine you would have done in the corporate world. And I don't mean any disrespect to the corporate world. I think they're all doing a great job, and they're an important part of society. But I think the complexity and the challenges that you live with when you grapple with very, very complex social issues has been a very different experience. And in many ways, it excites me to engage with communities, with people with multiple objectives, multiple aspirations, and figure out, how does one, sort of move in a direction where the world becomes more just, equitable, humane, and sustainable. That's my quick, if you like, journey, Vaishnavi. Thanks for that question.
Thank you so much, Ravi, for sharing that. Yes, Dom.
Thank you, Ravi, for sharing your journey. My journey was much shorter, of course. When I finished my UG, I wanted to go abroad for higher education. I tell people that I was quite a selfish guy. I thought my career path, I could shine only if I went abroad, and that was what I was planning for. Frankly, I stayed back in India only because some rules changed. But by then also I had started volunteering, and we had started Bhumi. And that gave me a sort of reason to stay back. I continued to volunteer as I progressed in my medical professional journey. For a long time, I thought Bhumi being a volunteer organization, as a founder, and we were promoting volunteerism, and we should continue to do that. And I thought maybe 10 years later, I would quit full time and join Bhumi. That was what I was thinking. But for me, a wake-up call was the Chennai floods. When the Chennai floods hit, I visited a lot of places. I realized that what we were doing until then was still just scratching the surface. There were so many challenges and problems that the country had, people around us had, and I felt that we should do more. Then for me, it was an overnight decision to quit. I should say that I enjoyed my job as an ophthalmologist. I used to meet a lot of people. I worked at a corporate hospital, so there were other doctors along with me, and so the work was balanced. Sometimes, there are a lot of patients, but most of the times it was very well balanced. So I did enjoy that job, but I switched because this meant a lot more to me. And I felt a sense of purpose. I felt much more strongly that I could do more with this. People still ask me even now that, why don't you continue as a doctor and do this? But I did that for about 7 years when I used to do both. The amount of time I'm able to give, the amount of involvement I have now is much more than I used to give before. And I can say the amount of work Bhumi has done has also grown. Um, of course, I agree with, we have similar feelings what Ravi shared, that the sense of satisfaction is much higher, and I'm a much more content person than I was before. And I think if I had to define how I'm feeling, I think there's a constant search to do more, but at the same time, personally, I'm as content as someone could aspire to be. So that's where I am. Thank you, Vaishnavi, for that prompt.
Thank you so much, Doc and Ravi. I personally could relate to a lot of what both of you shared. Just to like share here, I also used to work in corporate for like almost 5 years, and I made the switch to the social sector because I also was looking for something more meaningful, and I really wanted to mention that Ravi's point about privilege, because there are so many people who do want to do more but may not be able to, they think that this is not a viable career or this doesn't pay well. So, even if they have the income, there might not be. And I think that's the reason why we are here today, because we also want to share about that this can also be a good career option for somebody who wants to make a difference. So, yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your experiences. So, like you said, like Ravi, you also mentioned that you worked with Azim Premji Foundation for a few years, and Doc, you had also been, volunteering, I think, in shelter homes initially. So, what was the vision? By that time, what was that vision that made you want to start your own organization? Like, you could have continued working in different capacities. So, what was that vision you had that made you want to start your own organization? Maybe Doc can go first.
I don't think we started with a vision, to be very frank. It was a very unromantic thing. Now people have other ideas, but it was very ordinary. I think I met my co-founders on a social media portal. Those days, Orkut used to be very famous. We met on a group, and we met in person. We decided that we all wanted to volunteer. We wanted to. We felt one thing that was common was we were all very patriotic and we wanted to give back. But otherwise, I didn't know my co-founders before. They're just normal people whom I met on a social media portal, and we wanted to volunteer. That was about it. And somebody suggested, why don't you go to an orphanage and teach the kids there? We went to the orphanage, and that sort of made that action that might not have continued. Going there made us understand our privilege, right? We realized that we had received a good education. We were so focused on our careers, but then there's this sort of other side who's not getting education as well as they should be. And that sort of shocked us into continuing further. And it was a very organic growth. And I think our vision has grown with the pace of how the organization has grown. Initially, we just wanted to volunteer. Then we thought, okay, we should stay in Chennai. We should just volunteer in Chennai. We should do many things. Over time, we've understood that the kind of challenges the country faces are huge. At the same time, we believe that each person has a civic responsibility. And hence, now our vision is to get every Indian volunteering, give young people a platform to start contributing to society. And then maybe people will do other things. But Bhumi is about making that start, getting into the social sector, just experiencing what it is to work for a cause. I think now our vision is getting every Indian to volunteer. Yeah. Ravi, over to you.
Yeah. No, Doc, it's always so inspiring to listen to you. So my own journey was very interesting and maybe a little different also, in the sense that, I'm very keen to be in primary school education in rural India, and that's how I was in Azim Premji Foundation. And when we come from the corporate world, some of us have this arrogance of, I have run a bank, I have run a whatever, so I can now make a difference and contribute here. And you couldn't be more wrong than anything, because, it's such a different world. And I was very fortunate that I was in a place where I was able to actually engage a lot at the grassroots level, because we were working, from Barmet to Dhamtari, from Uttarkashi to Puducherry, and, places really, really what I would call the dust bowls of this, of the country. And one kept seeing as we worked in all these places where there were amazing people doing amazing work in every corner of this country. And absolutely amazing. And I don't think I've seen so many amazing people in my entire corporate life, working, across 50, 60 countries in my banking life. And but the sad thing was that they were all struggling to survive. Every corner I would go and they're struggling to survive, either to, raise funds or to manage some risks or get people or manage talent or manage processes. And I'm thinking, this is very simple stuff. You figure out the more difficult one, right? So I was, once interacting with Digantar, who's figured out how you teach girls from the most oppressed backgrounds. And they were going to close down because they didn't know how to manage their funds. And I'm thinking that is an absolute disaster, right? So that is one side of the story. The other side of the story is, my intuitively, the management ideas I would come with, right? So I came from a business background, were completely wrong in this place. In fact, you could do serious damage if you just applied, the MBA principles over here, because they're meant for an industrial world. They're meant for a, what I call a techno-managerial world. And of course, the purposes are very different. And it just struck me that you need management. The sector definitely needs management. And this management has to be very different from anything in the social sector, in the corporate world, because that's a very different type of management. And that was a big starting point. And really, then we went around the world to figure out, what is this management? Is it taught somewhere in the world? And you realize that there's been 150 years of work in building management for the state, which is, Masters in Public Administration. There's almost 120 years of work in what's called Masters of Business Administration, which is for the business world. But in the triumvirate of the society, which is state, markets, and civil society, there has been almost zero investment in understanding management for the social sector. And we try to apply MBA principles, or we try to apply some MBA principles, and they're not necessarily, workable. It might work, on a rare occasion. So very clearly we set off saying, if we can build management to, for the social sector, how do you build organizations? How do you bring resources together? How do you bring people together? How do you build networks and partnerships? How do you design interventions that can be scaled? We felt that we can have a huge impact in society. So the monies, the people, the ideas that are already there, if you're able to bring in management for the social sector, very uniquely for the social sector, we can create, impact at great scale. Think about it, right? Businesses today have become global. There are Yahoos and Googles and Starbucks and God knows whatever else, etc., etc. We haven't been able to do that in the social sector. And we need that. So management is really the ability to, build scale. It's people, it's resources, it's processes, it's solving problems, being contextual, etc., etc. So our mission was very clearly to say, how do we create a cadre of people who can go on to lead and manage social purpose organizations, so that those organizations can have impact at far greater scale than ever before. And if we can do that, we can really accelerate the process of pulling out many more billions of people from poverty, or allowing the planet to go into a sort of a fairly high-risk sort of a condition, or people who are in the margins and not getting the opportunities that you and I called as privilege. I mean, all those issues we can address at much faster scale. Today, the problem is going much faster than the solution. And we need to figure out how do we accelerate the solution and the solutioning to be able to outpace the problem. And that's the only way we will solve at large numbers. I mean, the population of this country was 300 million. Today, I would argue there are more than 300 million in abject poverty in our country, which is what I mean by the problem is moving fast. So we need bright youngsters, instead of going on to doing MBAs and becoming investment bankers, to come and, get into this. So that's really the sort of, spirit with which we set up ISDM. And, we started off by saying it'd be a proof of concept in the first 3 years. And today we've reached the point where the proof of concept is very well established and, very well accepted. So our students are obviously, getting in place and doing amazing work in amazing places and all that sort of stuff. So that's really, sort of my journey, if you like. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ravi and Doc. So I know, though the vision with which the organizations were, started were different, but I could actually see parallels in, both of your journey, because ultimately what both the organizations or the institutions are aiming for is to create a movement of change, right? So even through our volunteers, and even now with the Bhumi Fellowship, also our aim is to create that movement where our fellows go on to create our own organizations, or they go and become social entrepreneurs. And similarly, when you also talk about when they pass out of ISDM, then they go on to do their own thing in the sector. So just like you also mentioned in your experience that you worked with different organizations, there are various so many roles that people who go out can also do. So can you maybe just explain about, or give us a brief about, what are the different kind of type of organizations that are there in the sector for somebody who's coming in with very little idea about the sector, and what sort of roles that are there that are available that somebody could do? Yeah,
Should
Ravi,
I take that question, actually?
Yes, Ravi, please. Yeah, you just share that.
I'll do that. So the first thing is, there is an idea that the sector is like one monolithic structure. Like, there is one sector. It's not, and that's why I think your question is very, very relevant. And I'm very often having this conversation with the youngsters who come to ISDM or anywhere else. There are many archetypes within the sector. There are many types of organizations, right? And I'll give you, and you can look at it in many different ways. I'll give you one sort of a way which might be easy for our audience, the young audience here, to be able to understand. So think about it, right? You could have grassroots organizations, right? So grassroots organizations are working either in the villages, on livelihoods, creating livelihoods from goatery, duckery, working on watershed, working on village mapping, working on COVID response, whatever else. Or it could be with working in the cities. You're working in the slums, you're working in the, the really marginalized sections of society. You're working with, platform children, you're working with abused, people, you're working with rape victims. There's a whole gamut of grassroots social work where really you're directly engaging with. The next level is there are intermediary organizations. So there are organizations which do this work, but work through the grassroots organizations. So Impact works with out of school girl children, but they will have 200 NGOs across the country who are the implementing organizations. So these are like intermediary organizations. CRY is an intermediary organizations. Then if you go further away, there are organizations like what you would call a consulting organization, right? Who are helping these organizations to figure out how they can go about raising money, whatever. Within that, you would have organizations that are maybe supporting government projects. There are organizations that might be supporting corporates in their CSR work. There are consulting companies that support, NGOs. We have students who are working in, and this new area of supporting NGOs, organizations like Socion and Samhita and Satwa are all really exciting places where youngsters, find it great to go. There could be rights-based and advocacy organizations who are fighting for the rights of children, rights of special needs people, rights of old people, rights of, whatever. There are so many different segments in our country. You could be an activist organization where you're putting pressure on the system, where like a Narmada Bachao Andolan, you're putting pressure on the system to say, we need the system to change. There are think tank organizations, like CPR, Center for Policy and Research, who are studying and constantly giving research reports and knowledge and information for people to become aware of what's the situation and understand where do I need to put money, where do I need to invest. An ASER report on education tells the country, how's the education levels doing. So there are think tanks like that. There are organizations that are working on strengthening the system. How do I build capacity of the system? How do I build knowledge for the system, etc. Then, of course, there are philanthropic organizations, right? There are grant-making organizations. Within that also, there are foundations. So there is an Azim Premji Foundation, or there is a Gates Foundation, there is a Reliance Foundation. Then there are CSR organizations, right? and CSRs have become very big. Within that, there are public sector organizations, there are private sector organizations. And now there's an emerging set of organizations which are fairly cutting edge, which is social finance. How do you come up with innovative finance solutions? How do you create development bonds? There is a social stock exchange going to come. How do you bring experts who can understand how to work the social stock exchange? So that's a whole new area of, sort of impact investment. And again, within that, you take another axis, you've got domestic organizations, you've got international organizations. Then there are, there are societies, trusts, and, Section 8 companies. Then there are federations. There are loosely federated structures. You imagine a trade union, or imagine even an organization like Seva, large number of women who are working and connected together, with somewhat not very, very rigid structures, but, semi-formal structure. There are cooperatives that exist in the country. So you can think about it in many, many different ways. And if you look at it from the other side, which is you as a youngster want to work in this space, how do I think about this space? And there are some questions that I have always found which help a youngster to make those choices. And it starts with, how important is it for you to see a smile on the child's face? Because if it is important for you to see the smile on the child's face, then there's a certain type of work you do. You want to see the child, engage with the child, you work with the child. It could be in a classroom, it could be in an Anganwadi, it could be in a, in abuse zones, it could be in conflict zones. If it's not important for you to see the smile on the child's face, but you know that a child is smiling because of your work, then you go to one level removed type of work. How do I improve education in this country? How do I develop curriculum that works better? How do I fight for child rights? There are different types of work. Then you need to ask yourself, do you have an area you want to work on? And you go find an organization that aligns with what you want to do, and then you go and sort of work with them. Or, you sort of create your own organization and say, and I know a lot of youngsters who go out of ISDM set up their own social enterprises saying, I want to work with old people and make their lives meaningful. And I don't know anybody else who's doing it, so I'm going to set it up myself. Do you want to work in a small org or a big org? Today there are big organizations, right? There are 100 crore plus organizations, and there are also very organizations working in very localized areas. And these are all, individual choices. The one point I want to make before I close on this, Vaishnavi, if you will indulge me, is this idea that choices of social work you make not looking outside. Don't look outside and see what is the sector, who's doing what, how do I go. Look inside. It's about you. It's about the life you want to lead. It's about what is going to make you happy. In some senses, social work actually is a very inner sort of a feeling, a movement that comes out of there. So ask yourself and be very honest about what is it that you want. Don't do it because it sounds very cool. Do it because that's what my community is going to enjoy, or I can feel proud about saying that's what I'm doing, because they will all collapse. And some of these things help you to understand. So while I did talk through what are the organizations, I often say look at yourself. What is it that you want to be? What is the life? That's the beauty of the social sector. In the corporate world, like I told you, you're on stage. You're a CEO, you're a marketing director, and you put on a suit or a tie or depending on what. This is a space you want to be you. And that's the beauty of social sector. And don't take that privilege and joy of being in the social sector, I think you're missing out, and the sector and the society will also lose out if you're not coming with that core sort of passion and value structure. I hope that's making sense. Doc, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but those would be my thoughts.
No, Ravi, that was quite detailed.
Yeah, like Doc mentioned, I think, thank you, Ravi. This is very comprehensive, in terms of all the different perspectives in which we can look at organizations itself. And I really want to thank you for, finishing this response with such beautiful words, because I think that is the most important part, or the most beautiful part about working in the sector. And, I think this is something that I will also hold in my, mind for a while to come. So I'm just coming to you, Doc, to look at a different perspective. So having worked in the sector and worked with so many people, like, like you said, we worked exclusively with volunteers for so long and with so many different organizations. So in your experience, what do you think are some of the tangible and intangible benefits of working in the social sector? It can be in any capacity.
I'll talk from my experience. I think while there are all types of people in society, I think in the sector you will meet some of the nicest people. I have met some of the nicest people. Many of them have become good friends, and who've continued to, who share that passion. You While you work in a company, you all have different thought processes. Whereas you come in this sort of mission-driven sort of approach, you meet really, really nice people. I can count out the number of people whom I sort of think like, why is this person here? It's very few and far in between. Generally, you meet the nicest of people here. So the kind of friendships you have, the kind of comradeship, that's something unique. Probably it's there in the army and places like that, but I think that's one of the pluses of the sector. Like I shared earlier, the kind of satisfaction and contentment you will have is, I think, probably unmatched that you have in this sector. Whether you're in the front seeing the child smile, or you're making that happen at the back, you feel you can go to bed peacefully at the end of the day, thinking that you achieved something, made the world a better place. One misconception about the sector is that the sector can pay. So you don't have to worry about money. There are well-paying jobs in the sector. Though the sector does pay maybe a little lesser than what corporates can pay, if money is not your primary motivation, there'll be enough and more to sort of sustain your journey. When you invest your time in maybe going to an ISDM or joining a full-time career or taking up a fellowship, there are lots of job opportunities afterwards. Even with the Bhumi fellowship itself, there's a stipend. So that's not something you need to worry about. You'll be able to take care of yourself and your family in the sector. So I'll just stop with this question. Yeah.
Thank you, Doc. Ravi, would you like to add anything to what?
I was just going to say there is such a myth. I'm half the time talking to parents, trying to explain to them that there are meaningful careers. I just give you a couple of data points, right? I mean, the first 2 years, our students graduated with like an average of 2 jobs per student, and an average salary, of approximately like 60,000 rupees a month. It's not like the sector doesn't have jobs and salary, and I hate to sell the sector based on salary. I would never do that. I would obviously say you need to come into the sector for the passion, but money is hygiene. You need to pay for your fees. You need to pay for bills. You need to put food on the table. And there's absolutely enough money for that. You may never become an investment banker type salary, but you will have very, very meaningful, and you will, create a very respectable family, and all that sort of stuff is definitely, I completely agree with Doc on that one. That's the biggest myth in this sector, that, oh, this is just a volunteering space. You can never ask for money. You will never get paid. No, I don't think so. There is a volunteering space, but there is also a career space over here. Completely agree with Doc.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, because I think even I've also dealt with this when I wanted to make the switch, and I had to answer so many people, and not just my family, everybody that I knew. I had to explain to them that, this is a career here. And I agree that this is definitely one of the most prevalent myths for anybody who's, looking at the sector from the outside in. So I'm really glad that, we got to address it directly in this space. So this, it's helping me to go into the segue into the question that I had in mind. So for someone, who's either a fresher, who's just completed some degree, or somebody who has some kind of work experience which is not aligned with the social sector, so what are some ways in which they can enter into the social sector? Ravi, would you like to go first? I'm addressing this to both.
Yeah, I can definitely. Yeah, no, I'll start. And I'll share my experiences with students I have seen coming to ISDM, and that's a very good mix. We get students coming from all over the country, from engineering, arts, doctor, legal, with experience, without experience. Half of them come from within the social sector, half of them come from outside the social sector, from companies like Accenture and Wipro and Infosys. or fellowships, like the Teach for India. So very different background. I find there are 4 types of students who come, Vaishnavi. The first is a student who comes in very sure of what he wants to do based on her life experiences, without trying to, in any way be narrow. It could be that my mother, suffered from cancer and I want to give my life to work on cancer. Or I got good school education and thereby I went on to do amazing things. So I'm very clear I want to do so. So based on some life experiences, people are very clear of what they want to do. And then you pursue that. And I think, like I always say, it has to connect back to who you are and what you want to do. The second category of student is somebody who's come and analyzed and done a very cognitive analysis of saying, I think education has the largest impact, or public health is this I want to be, or livelihoods, or women. And they make a very cognitive choice. And I would say that has a lower level of surety than the first category. And that's okay, but as long as you accept that a cognitive choice is not as good as a personal choice that, and you need a combination. The third category is have to be either in the gender space or in the, the education space or in the urban development space. I'm very confused. And they come into the space and they need to figure out how, and the fourth is, of course, somebody who says, I really want to be in the social work space because I think the society is really, not where it should be, and I can't live a life without making, a contribution to that. So, but I don't know what. I'm happy to work in education, everything. My own view is that the best way to do these things, and I know places like ISDM, and I might be a little prejudiced, is definitely a place where students come and they are able to figure out, by talking to people, by actually volunteering in spaces, by doing project work, or so on and so forth. So I think you don't need to worry about your background. I think you should look ahead and make your choices. Don't say, I'm an engineer, so I only want to remain an engineer. Look ahead and say, I want to be involved in whatever. It could be education, it could be water, it could be sanitation, it could be anything. So my advice to students is, don't worry about your background, worry about what life choices you want to make and look ahead. And the way to resolve that I talked about is you can come to, you can go and volunteer yourself. You can, talk to different people. And like Doc said, this sector has the most amazing people you can talk to. Unlike the corporate world, a very senior guy will never give you time to talk to. This sector, you can, reach out to people and they will be more than willing to talk to you and give you advice. So my advice is do something, don't sit, because a lot of us fall into what I call living room armchair social work, which is, you're constantly talking, you're putting some posts on blogs and Twitter, but you're really not doing anything. My advice is do something about it. You will not regret it. There's a little bit of leap of faith, but get in there, you will figure out. And I'll be honest, finally, it doesn't matter what work you're doing, as long as you feel that you're contributing, it will be worthwhile. It can be education, it can be public health, it can be even working on people with spinal cord injuries. Everything is important. And the world needs people to work on every aspect. So don't overthink this, oh, I'm an engineer, so I should only do engineering. Or, whatever. I think you should be more passionate about the life ahead. Don't be a slave to your background. That would be my advice to people. And competencies are things you will pick up. And I think the most important competency required in this sector is a passion for a great society, an equal society, a dignified society, a sustainable society. That's the biggest competency you need. The other things we will figure out.
I'll just add a little bit. I think don't worry whether you're a fresher, how old you are, where you are in life. I think the most easiest, simplest, lowest hanging fruit is to start volunteering. Whatever cause you like, you don't have to travel very far. There are so many virtual volunteering opportunities. Try something out. Maybe you'll like it. You don't have to, always quit your job and move full time. You can just start by volunteering, whether it is to plant a tree sapling or to teach a child or to clean a lake or clean the beach or whatever it is, right? Write an exam for a visually challenged person. Whatever the cause is, start volunteering. And you don't have to be at a certain age. During this pandemic, this last 1 year, I've spoken to at least 2 or 3 students who started volunteering at class 11. And there are a bunch of class 11 students in Hyderabad who are now raising funds to provide menstrual hygiene kits to women. There are kids, children who are raising funds to provide health and hygiene kits. I don't know, at class 11, the only thing I knew was go to school, come back, study. I think young people now are so much more aware about things. I mean, there's always another side which is more closed, more into social media, but then you don't have to wait. And it's never too early and it's never too late. So start volunteering. And if you're looking for something more structured, there are a lot of internships with any nonprofit will have some internships. Like I got into the sector because I went to that orphanage to teach. If I had not gone there to teach and done something else, I don't know if I'll be here. So to sort of provide a similar experience, you don't know, if you go to a privileged school, you don't know the state of a government school or a low income school. To do that, we right now are running an internship where, back to school internship. We are encouraging you to go to a government school, understand the problems there, talk to children there, talk to teachers there, have a discussion about the education system. So start with something like that. If you're looking for a more structured thing, you don't have to quit your job. You can be if you're an engineer and you love technology, you can help build websites for NGOs. If you're a communications professional, if you like marketing, or where people who do marketing support because they would have learned marketing, but their job doesn't allow them to do that. So they want to come here and do that. So it could be just a passion and you could volunteer for that. So you don't have to quit your job. There are so many ways to start. It's never too early or never too late.
Thank you for putting it so beautifully, Doc. So I think the main takeaway is that, all of us have our own skill set, or even if we have some sort of experience, there's so many opportunities available in the sector that people don't really know, that you can always find your own niche, wherever. You just have to search, or you just have to start, right? I think that's the takeaway I personally took away from what both of you shared here. So just to go a little bit specific, I'm coming back to you, Ravi. In terms of somebody, because I myself came with some work experience, and I know people who have worked in my sector or in my organization, and then who want to utilize that work experience and convert it into a successful career in the social sector. Maybe, like you mentioned, there are opportunities through maybe doing a PG course or some master's. So what sort of courses or options are available for them? What are some things that they can pursue? Could you share some details about that?
Sure. So, it will depend on, what a student wants to do. And I'll give you some of the sort of options that are available to students depending on the type of work that they want to do, right? And in many ways, it goes back to some of the earlier things we said in the chat about seeing the child's smile on the child's face and things like that. So if I break it up for the audience here today, let's say there are three, types of studies that you can do. One is if you want to become a social worker and a grassroots social worker, you want to be out there in the village, living there with the communities, with the society that's there, or in the slums, or whatever it is. So if you want to be a social worker, and I call them, the social workers, and they're a very important part of this whole sector, then you should go and do an MSW, right? A master's in social work. So Tata Institute of Social Science is a great place to go and do a master's in social work. And there are many other social work schools in this country. But what that does, it prepares you for grassroots social work. That's really, obviously there's a little bit to it, but I'm trying to make it easy for our audience to understand. Another category is this category that is studying development. And study development so that I have ideas of what ought to be, what is the contribution of sociology, anthropology, history, psychology, how does development work, what are development changes, that sort of thing that you then go into development studies, right? And development studies is an area which has now become, quite popular, especially with Azim Premji University, which offers, masters in development masters. But there it's more about understanding development and understanding, the theoretical nuances of development. You study development. And the third, in many ways, I want to take this opportunity to also talk about ISDM, because that's a very, very sort of a new area, right? And that's essentially about organizations, right? How do you design interventions and how do you bring together people, resources, networks, partnerships, working with the government, state, and build organizations that need to have an impact. So if you look at the business world, the social worker is the engineer, the scientist is the development studies person, and the MBA is the development management professional that I'm talking about. And this whole development management space is very, very new, because the social sector always rejected management and said, those are the guys who created all the problems, keep them far away. And I think what we've said is that is true, but that is a type of management. We need to figure out what is a different way of managing. You can't not manage. You do want to do well. You want to do what you want to do at scale, as fast as possible, bring together, everything that can work for the society. So like I said, it is a plug for ISDM, but ISDM is really trying to get into that space of producing a cadre of people who will become like the MBAs of the social sector. But MBA is a horrible way to put it, because that clearly reeks of business in every ounce of that word. It's about, how do you become organization builders? How do you design interventions at scale? So that's really what an ISDM. So like I said, if you want to do social work, grassroots social work, go and do a master's in social work. If you want to be in that space of understanding development and understanding how does social change happen, how do you study the underpinnings of all that, you go and do development studies. And if you want to be in the organizations and build a career in management in the social sector, and go on to become leaders and quote unquote CEOs or CXOs, then you go into an ISDM type program. That probably is a very simple way of doing it. And then there are a lot of new areas, right? How do I leverage technology for social change? And I go very deep into my own area of technology. Or like Doc was just saying, I go into behavior communication and really specialize on that. But some of those options are not available in India. Maybe you have to go abroad. And the problem with studying abroad, which I tell youngsters, is if you want to work in India, you want to study in the context. The social work is one space where I can't study in another context and apply it here. That works in management. How I sell Coca-Cola in America is not very different from how I'll sell Coca-Cola in India. But how I will address hunger in America is very different from how I'll address hunger in India. And there are a lot of cultural moorings. There's a lot of norms, beliefs. So I don't recommend people to go outside the country to study. And not that I'm against, studying abroad or anything like that. But if you want to work in the social sector, my advice is invest in the social sector and go and look at what is happening elsewhere in the world at a later stage. So, you start working, volunteering, you start getting engaged, but study to do the job, because, you won't become a dentist without becoming, doing your MD. You won't become a doctor without doing an MBBS. You won't become. So the social work is also a space you must invest yourself. Don't undermine, the poor just because they ask you questions. Invest in yourself. Very, very important. And I would recommend any of these, sort of programs. Now, like Doc said, I can't give up my full-time job. That's a very different category. And then I can do short-term courses. I can invest in listening to people, going and, studying what is actually happening. That's one type of work. The other time courses like ISDM or any of these other places where you take a year and you invest yourself and then you start a career in that space, which is a whole-time career or whatever. Those would be the kind of options, Vaishnav. And before we close, I'm sure we can take a few questions if people want to be more specific, but I'm giving you a somewhat of a wide set of options.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi. I think you gave I think a very beautiful snapshot of the kind of opportunities that are there and the kind of courses that that they can pursue. And I'm sure that it's very informative, for somebody who's coming in, just with just the idea of, okay, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. I think all of these information are definitely would be very helpful. And I really liked your analogies that you shared. I really enjoyed that. So thank you for sharing that. So one thing, I'll just go back to Doc. We're talking about doing courses like studying. So Ravi also mentioned, you have to study, we learn, but then you also have to do it on the ground, right? So in that perspective, now recent years, now there are more and more fellowships that have started coming in, and even we have our own, Bhumi fellowship here. How do you think, fellowships make people ready for the social sector in their own way?
I'll talk specifically from the Bhumi Fellowship, and then I'll connect it to other fellowships. So what the Bhumi Fellowship does is, it helps you understand the education sector. 2 years full-time, you're placed in a school where you understand working with children, you understand everything from pedagogy to teacher mindset, how do you work with school leaders like headmasters and headmistresses, how do you help build a vision for them, you understand what sort of infrastructure is there, you understand what sort of systemic challenges are there, preventing children from succeeding and also bringing children forward, but then there are also all those challenges are there. So it's like a lab. 2 years you're working inside a school, understanding the school, understanding the education system. You're not just helping those children, but it's more for your own development. It's paid. You can work like that. There are many other fellowships like that. Vaishnavi, you yourself have been a fellow. You were an India fellow. There's this Teach for India fellowship where you can work in schools. There's Gandhi fellowship, and there are, I think, many other fellowships depending on what you want to do. So fellowship is hands-on. Most of the time you get paid, and how do you choose something is depending on lots of things, right? Which sector you want to be, which area do you want to work, where do you see yourself? So like Ravi mentioned, if you want to do social work, you do MSW. If you want to be like the management person, you go to ISDM. But if you're looking only for hands-on things to get into the sector, then you choose a fellowship. That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Doc, for sharing the perspective. So these are all the questions that I had from my end today. So we'll take some questions from the audience now. So we had a question from Sheetal who asked, what if someone can't choose a particular field in volunteering? They want to do many things like teaching, saving, etc. Should we only do it in one field or in all the desired fields?
Sheetal, yeah, I'll take that question. Sheetal, if you're not, it's okay if you're not clear about what you want to do. You can find an organization like Bhumi which offers you many options, and you can volunteer. If you Google for volunteer opportunities, I'm sure there are lots of options listed online. I would suggest try to identify what you want to do, but if you're not clear, find an organization that offers you multiple opportunities. There's Bhumi, there's iVolunteer, there's Connect For. I'm sure there are lots of online opportunities where you can find different options.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. So we have one more question from Sridevi about, they've asked about job security in the social sector. Maybe Ravi or Doc, would anybody like to expand a bit about that?
Yeah, so again, there are a lot of myths about job security. There's a myth that in some places there is more security and some places there is less security. I don't think there is anything like that. I think the job security or the job insecurity is as much in any place that you would go into. There will be different reasons. Businesses will fail and you have job insecurity. Social sector is not able to raise funding and you could have job security. So there are very different reasons for remaining or failing in the space. But what I find in the sector is, like I said, there's a lot of people talk to each other, people are in touch with each other. There's a lot more collaboration that happens in the sector, and thereby your ability to find another job is much higher than maybe in the corporate world. And I don't mean to put down the corporate world or anything like that. So I think there is job insecurity. I would be lying if I said there is no job insecurity. But it's really a question of investing in yourself and making sure that you as an individual are able to tide through some of these highs and lows. So if you're a you're a valuable person because of your experience, because of your knowledge, because of what you've studied, because of what you have invested, because of your experiences, you will reduce the job insecurity. And that's really the way to think about it, And the other thing I always say is, when you come into the sector, you come in with a big heart. You don't come in with fears. You come in with a lot of courage and conviction, and you go do what you're doing. You're not here for a job. In that sense. So job security doesn't even come as a question for some of us in the social sector, only because we believe it. This is the life I want. So where's the question of? But I understand. Obviously you need to earn salary and you need to pay your bills, and thereby that is important. but I would think about it very differently.
Thank you, Ravi. Doc, is there anything you'd like to add here?
No, I totally agree with what Ravi mentioned.
Thank you. So one more question asking, is there any part-time fellowship programs that we can do without quitting the job that we can try?
Sudhakar, I would urge you to search online. I'm sure there must be some options. I know of one opportunity. In Make a Difference, they have a fellowship program where you, as a volunteer, you can do a fellowship. You can become a MAD fellow, and you're given certain leadership responsibilities. And you can grow in those roles and take up more leadership responsibilities. That's the only one I'm familiar about, but I'm sure there must be other opportunities. Don't worry, there are enough and more opportunities for the people who are looking for it. Like Ravi shared, if you're good at your job, there will be less job insecurity. Similarly, if you're good, there'll be many opportunities for you. Don't worry, you can do both things. You can do many things also.
Thank you so much, Doc. So we have Aditya Kumar who's raised a hand. Aditya, do you have any question you'd like to ask?
Aditya, I would encourage you to use the chat box and type your question in so that we can take it. Swati also had her hand up initially. Swati, if you have a question, please type it up. Prachi is asked whether you can start volunteering online. Prachi, there are lots of opportunities to start online, offline. Just Google for it.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the questions we have so far. So any words or any we already touched upon any myths that we already had the social sector, especially in terms of salary. So is there anything else that you would like to say, Doc and Ravi, to somebody who's is interested in the social sector? They want to get started. Any words from your end?
I'll say that the sector needs a lot of. All of you are here because you're slightly interested in this area. I'll say that the sector needs smart, passionate people like you. Whatever your situation allows you, do that. If you want to do volunteering, do volunteering. If you want a full-time job, there are lots of opportunities here. India needs people like you. So take that step. Do whatever you can. Everything counts and everything is important.
Thank you, Doc.
Yeah. No, I just want to echo what Doc just said, which is that the sector, the society really, really needs, even more than it ever has, its brightest, passionate youngsters to come and work in the sector, to invest in themselves and become part of the sector. I derive a lot of optimism about the future of the society and the planet on the youngsters I get to see in these sort of conversations. And I really would urge them to, sort of pursue careers in the social sector in whatever way, like Doc said, that interests them and they want to go about. There are fellowships, there are programs, there's Bhumi Fellowship, there's ISDM. And I know both of us are open at this point in time. So if you want any help, and it, like I said, it's not only because we want you to come there, but whatever it is that you want to do, but really the sector and the society needs you like it never had.
Okay, so yeah, we've come to the end of the session. So I want to thank both Doc and Ravi for sharing so many wonderful, you shared your experiences and wonderful thoughts. And I personally found it very helpful. And I'm sure that everybody who's joined us today will also find it helpful. So I just like to close by reiterating that anybody who's interested to apply for courses, so you can visit ISDM website. I can share the link in the chat. Please visit, check it out for any courses that you're interested in, and you can sign up. And you can also visit fellowship.bhumi.ngo for those of you who are interested in the Bhumi Fellowship. So applications are open for both sides. So you can visit and apply as soon as possible because selections are already going on. So we're looking forward to all of you being part of the social sector in whatever way possible. So yeah, that's it from our end. Thank you, Doc and Ravi. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Vaishnavi.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be talking to all of you. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Vaishnavi. Really wonderful.
Thank you to the Bhumi and the ISDM team for
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Have a good weekend. Bye. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.